Star-crossed lovers, tales of woe and passion that tug at our heartstrings. Romeo and Juliet, Cleopatra and Mark Antony, Hir and Ranja. These are just some of the many star-crossed lovers whose tales of woe and passion tug at our heartstrings. Now, whether that's out of voyeurism or empathy, who can say? But maybe we'll find out in today's Bumblebee video all about the 10 forbidden loves that changed the course of history. Number 10, we're starting strong and sweet. It's love's in the name. Meet Richard and Mildred, the couple that took down America's interracial marriage ban. Both of Mildred's parents were African American, but each was also part indigenous, Rappahannock and Cherokee respectively. Richard, on the other hand, was a white man, and while they were fortunate that their ethnically diverse community intermingled over things like drag racing and music and work, their friendship still towed the line of their town's acceptability, and their blossoming love crossed it. So in June of 1958, their love crossed the state lines, 80 miles from Virginia, where so-called anti-miscegenation laws made interracial unions illegal. To say "I do" in Washington, D.C. When they return home, the rumors travel, and only 5 weeks go by before police officers barge through their unlocked front door and awaken the newlyweds in the middle of the night. When a sheriff asked what Richard was doing in bed with this lady, Richard, half asleep, does like that groggy sit-up and just sort of wordlessly pointed at the marriage certificate hanging on the wall. The couple is hauled from their bed, arrested, and sentenced to 1 year in prison or a 25-year exile from their home state. They chose to be together in exile. The couple relocated to Washington, where they lived for 5 years and had 3 children. Against the backdrop of the loving struggle, the civil rights movement was taking root, which inspired the couple in 1963 to contact U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, who referred them to the American Civil Liberties Union. Volunteer lawyers ultimately took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, where the landmark Loving v. Virginia decision of 1967 unanimously ruled that bans on interracial marriage in Virginia and 15 other states were unconstitutional. Jeff Nichols' tender film Loving from 2016 brings Richard and Mildred's story to life. It's a tale as old as time. Number 9 is The Actress and the Farmer Boy. Let's imagine ourselves in the middle of the Byzantine Empire, when Emperor Justinian was a powerful man. He hadn't always been. Rather, Justinian had been born a poor farmer, and the silver spoon only landed in his mouth by chance because his uncle, ruling Emperor Justinian I, offered to raise him. Theodora, meanwhile, was fatherless, raised by a single mother. She was an actress and a working girl, then the mistress of the governor in Libya. Then she joins an aesthetic community in the desert near Alexandria. It's here that the two finally meet, and man was Justinian enamored. Theodora was cultured and bold. The two loved one another quickly, but there was a major impediment. It was forbidden for a government official to marry an actress, them being working girls. Now, Theodora wasn't one anymore, but for all intents and purposes, to the law, she would never stop being one, and that didn't sit right with Justinian. Despite his uncle being emperor and so close to him, it was the Empress Euphemia who forbid it the most. So, what did they do? They waited the bitter bitch out. The second she died, Justin's uncle came through for him, reforming the law so actresses were allowed to wed. And despite all odds, the son of a farmer and the daughter of an actress became the emperor and the empress of the Byzantine Empire, one of the only known royal couples in history to rule as equals. Number 8 is about how you should always accept that invitation to take a walk. On September 8, 1907, the day that Alice B. Tolkis landed in Paris, she met Gertrude Stein, an avant-garde writer and the woman who would change her life. Gertrude invited Alice out for a walk the next day to show her around. This walk arguably never truly ended, as they continued to meet for successive days, then weeks, then months. This single walk resulted in 4 decades of romantic and intellectual partnership that nurtured some of the best artists of the 20th century. In Paris, the couple had the freedom to live their lives out in the open in a way that the United States wouldn't allow. While it had to be coded, their sensual exploits did make it into Gertrude's written work. At first, Alice worked as Gertrude's secretary, but within a few years, she'd moved in with Gertrude in the home that became the preeminent literary and artistic salon of Paris, drawing artistic icons such as Pablo Picasso, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Henri Matisse. Every time the get-togethers were restricted to Alice's preference for smaller, more controlled gatherings. And a hilarious note, however, for you guys, is Hemingway was eventually excommunicated from that cool cat club for trying to hit on Stein. Anyways, this couple influenced the male artistic and literary sphere to perceive gender how it never been before, to incorporate elements of a woman that were not traditional. Number 7 is how a brilliant mind doesn't always equal a great guy. It's the literary masterpiece. Married and father of 10 children, Charles Dickens was the living embodiment of domesticality, as is echoed in his novels. However, living up to his last name, Charles wasn't very loyal and had endless affairs. The most famous of which is the one he ended his marriage for at age 45, the beautiful 19-year-old actress Ellen Ternan. Talk about a midlife crisis. Her acting skills weren't anything too special, but it was her youth and beauty that hooked Charles. He left his wife, first of all, which was literally unheard of in the Victorian era alone, let alone the fact that he left her with like a bajillion children. Then he would only ever cast Ellen in his plays, even replacing other cast actresses with her, including his own daughter once. Ellen is said to have inspired a lot of his works, and most notably the Great Expectations Estella is made in her image. Ellen, like Charles' nature and his literary brain. Also, I mean, dude's got money and a house in the Victorian era. Can you blame the girl? I mean, you probably could. She was a homewrecker, which was part of what made it difficult for Charles to keep his affair hidden. But they did it for 13 meticulously long years. This included burning all the correspondence, never being seen together in public. He'd pretend he didn't know her if she was brought up, and he'd ask her to take different aliases when traveling or staying with him. I don't think anyone in our modern times could have handled Ellen's role with how big of a demand there is to be publicly claimed now. Maybe that social need comes from how many affairs the heart people made sacrifices for in the past, such as Ellen. If Ellen had ever caused a fuss, or they'd chosen to out their relationship, the works of Charles Dickens would have been completely smeared and buried, including the man himself. You know him and you may love him. It's number 6, changing religion. If you don't know who I'm talking about just from that title alone, you shouldn't have slept through the most interesting part of Tudor history in class. Thankfully for you, Bumblebee has plenty of videos that can catch you up to date on all things history, so I encourage you subscribe to the Hive to stay up to date. Anyways, to give context to those unknowing, I'm referring to Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and how Henry famously created a new branch of the Christian religion simply because he wanted to get some that badly. And because I guess that's how easy it is to make religions. I don't know. While their love story ends with her body in 2 pieces and Henry having like 100 more wives after, they still arguably had a sweet start. Boleyn was the lady-in-waiting to Henry's wife, Catherine of Aragon. Anne's plan was pretty spectacular. Give Henry enough to hook him, but insist there be no hanky-panky until they were married. If there was ever a way to lock in the Queen's title, that was it, because Henry all about begged the Pope to let him divorce Catherine. The Pope, who knows Henry's just doing all of this to get some, says no. So Henry, angry and ornery, takes matters in his own hands. He set reformation into motion, separating the church and the state. He did this by denouncing the authority of the Catholic Church over his marriage and his country, and with his new religion and new declaration of supreme head on earth of the Church of England, King Henry VIII got his divorce and his marriage to Anne Boleyn. A bit more of modern loving, it's the airway stars for number 5. The trouble with a lot of people is that they work too hard at staying married. They make a business of it. When you work too hard at a business, you get tired, and when you get tired, you get grouchy. You start fighting, and when you start fighting, you're out of business. This is how George Burns answered a question to how he and Gracie Allen kept a happy, healthy marriage. These two were famous for radio and television hostings and roles, even having the Burns and Allens show. Theater lovers George Burns and Gracie Allen met at the Vanderbilt Theater in New Jersey. They soon became stars in radio and television, during which time Burns fell in love with his already engaged co-star. 1 year later, at a Christmas party, Burns made Allen cry, and I swear to you guys, it plays out just like that scene in The Office when Pam and Jim have that first kiss on casino night. Gracie relents and admits she feels the same towards him despite her engagement. She also said that he was the only boy to make her cry, and this must have meant she truly loved him, but that's significantly more questionable. This famous couple in history defied social standards at the time in 2 ways. As a Jew and Irish Catholic who married, and yes, that was a big deal in the 1940s, and they also adopted 2 children and were public about not being able to produce their own. And also, yes, this was a big deal at the time. It set the stage for other celebrities, let alone normal people dealing with infertility. Both having come from poverty, the couple made sure their children had the childhood that they never could. Number 4 is A Tale of Two Kings. A buff, bronzed, and unbeatable warrior, Richard the Lionheart never let fear deter him from his ultimate goals, even on the battlefield of love. Sorry, I had to do something corny at some point. I love love. With no children and an obvious disregard for his wife, Richard had become something of a gay icon, especially considering his romance with King Philip II of France. Now, historians try to rationalize that they were just super close friends, but evidence is pointing very obviously the other way. In 1187, a chronicle reported that the two men were so close that at night, a bed did not separate them. And while they engaged in that religious kiss of like God I can't remember the name of, nowhere in the church did it say to use tongue. So try me. Unfortunately, the two kings' relation began to sour after Richard became king of England, dumped Philip's sister, who was his beard/fiance, Alice, and then fought battle after battle for medieval dominance. Philip probably could have toughed it through if Richard didn't act like that one nickname for the name Richard and spread a rumor that Alice had an affair and an illegitimate child. Not exactly things you should do if you were trying to keep your man lover's good side. The pair spent the last 5 years of Richard's life in bitter rivalry and open war. Richard ended up winning many of the battles between the two, but Philip outlasted him. Number 3 is the beautifully tragic tale of Anarkali and Salim. This story is a blend of legend and actuality coming to us from India. The tale is that Salim, the son of the great Mughal Emperor Akbar, fell in love with a harem girl named Anarkali, the pomegranate blossom. Aw, she was an incredible dancer and performer, but as a harem girl, she was a lowborn and therefore was not allowed to have a relationship nor wed. So she tried to keep away from Salim. But such intense love couldn't be concealed forever, and the enraged emperor was disgusted by his son's affair and demanded it end. When he wouldn't, the emperor locked Anarkali in a dungeon from which Salim rescues her and in a rage starts a civil war against his father, one that he lost very quickly. So Akbar gave his son two choices, either surrender the girl or face death penalty. Salim chose death. Anarkali, however, did not accept this. She asked the emperor to trade her life for Salim's, but also to have one night with him beforehand. Salim and Anarkali get their beautiful night before she's taken by the guards to the present-day Anarkali Bazaar in Lahore. Here, she is placed in a hole where they brick her shut to bury her alive. However, there's a second version to the story that states the emperor allowed Anarkali to escape from the ditch via a tunnel with her mother on the promise she never returned. Thus, since it's never been opened, it's not known whether Anarkali survived or not, and her legend has mesmerized the people of South Asia. Subject to films, music videos, plays, she's caught the eye of nearly every big name in arts in South Asia for the past 100 years. Another unexpected spin is that of the Castaway and Princess, number 2. Some of the very first people of Spanish and Mayan blood were not the products of violated women and pillaged villages, rather actual love. 15th century Spaniard Gonzalo Guerrero survives a shipwreck only to find himself taken hostage by the Maya. Not wanting to get his heart literally ripped out of his chest, Gonzalo begins picking up the language and the customs. He manages to gain acceptance, and in return, the Maya allow him to teach them about Spanish combat and language, which are said to have helped allow them drive out the conquistadors. With his superb military prowess and easy assimilation into the culture, Gonzalo rose through the ranks of the Mayan clan warriors, and ultimately has the immensely high honor of marrying the Maya chief's own daughter, Zazilha. While not much is known about Gonzalo's life with the Mayas, might have something to do with the Inquisition burning every Mayan text except 4, thanks for that. What we do know is that he and Zazilha were among history's most famous interracial couples. Historians believe that their children were probably the first American mestizos, which are people who had both indigenous and white European heritage. When Hernan Cortes arrived and snuck into the Mayan lands, he and his men were astonished to find a Spanish man living there, and they tried to convince him to leave, but all Gonzalo said was that I am married and I have 3 children, and they look on me as a lord here, a captain in a time of war. My face is tattooed and my ears are pierced. What would the Spaniards say if they saw me like this? Go and God's blessing be with you. This is my place. Gonzalo later died fighting alongside the Maya comrades against the Spanish conquistadors, and today Gonzalo is considered the father of the Mestizaje, and a statue of Guerrero and his family is now on display in Mérida, Mexico. And last but never least, number 1, it takes a village. While attending law school in 1940s England, Ruth met the chief of the Bamangwato clan and future president of Botswana. The two fell into a precarious romance, already nervous about the intolerance to come, and rightfully so. When they announced their marriage in 1948, Ruth was immediately thrown out of her home, while Sartzi's uncle stated that if he brings this white wife here, I will fight him to the death. Then the politicians swarm in, as the Afrikaner politicians controlling the South Africa had forbidden interracial relationships and the apartheid, and they threatened the British government to prevent their marriage. Religious officials stalled their wedding by requiring them to seek approval from the local bishop, and just about every landlord turned them away for being an interracial couple. The last straw is when Kama is asked to renounce his chieftaincy. His refusal has him exiled. For 8 years, Ruth and Kama lived as exiles in England until the Bamangwato sent a personal cable to the Queen in protest. Having now renounced his and his children's chieftaincy, presidency, in 1956 the couple and their 3 children were finally allowed to return as private citizens. In the following year, Sertsi formed the Bechuanaland Democratic Party and became its leader. The party won Bechuanaland's first democratic elections in 1965 and Kama became their first prime minister. His new republic would then become known as Botswana, because if you aren't gonna let him back in the club, he was gonna make his own, and that's what's up. Alrighty, well I hope your hearts are full, viewers, because that's the end of another video. Remember to cherish and value those you meet in life, because you never know the impact a little love can have or how far it goes. Maybe share some love in the comments today, or tell your own forbidden love story if you have any. Until next time, hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.